Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the very first time that the Christchurch City Council has run a completely off-site Skype council meeting, and we're hoping with the audio-visual option that we have managed to develop for today, that it will be a much better experience than it was last time with the audio experience, which probably could have been a little bit better, but it wasn't on that occasion. So welcome back to all of those who are tuning in for a better experience of democracy in action, but at a distance, I'm afraid, recognising that during this time of COVID-19 lockdown, we all have to work in different ways to make this happen. And I thank all of the staff of the organisation that has made this happen. It does mean that some of our essential staff have had to go into the building in order to facilitate the virtual meeting room, and I would like to thank all of them for doing that and to make this happen. So thank you very much. We begin our meeting with a karakia timatanga, and I'd like to invite Councillor Melanie Coker to that purpose.
Great, thank you. Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, ti hei Māori ora.
Kia ora, and thank you very much, Councillor Coker. I have no apologies for this morning's meeting, and there are some...
I had sent through an apology for a partial absence from 10:15 to 10:45.
I apologise, yes, fine. The Councillor Turner, Deputy Mayor Turner, will be absent for a period of time as he is presenting a submission on behalf of the Council, so I would move that his apology for absence be recorded, be accepted. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded by Pauline Cotter. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. I apologise, Andrew. Declarations of interest. There are declarations of interest. We're considering CCHL on the agenda today. So the four councillor directors, myself, Andrew Turner, Sarah Templeton and James Goff will be stepping back from that decision and not participating in it. The supplementary papers...
sorry, Leanne. Item 8, I've got a declaration in too.
Oh, and item 8 too, which is in the public excluded agenda. I've accepted that as a declaration of interest as well. Supplementary reports. I'll move that that we include the supplementary report in the meeting. Do I have a seconder for that?
Second.
Jimmy Chen.
Yes.
I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye.
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 Those opposed say no.
No.
That's carried. And can you record Councillor Jani Johansson against the motion? We'll move on to verbal update by the COVID-19 Incident Management Team Lead. And could I invite Mary Richardson to take the floor? No, I'm afraid that, excuse me, but I'm sorry, but you sound like a Dalek from Doctor Who, so that's not good. No, that's not better. Not unless you're a Dalek who can understand what you're saying. So I'd rather that the resolution of the problem there is resolved offline. I don't know whether we're in a position to begin the economic recovery update, are we? And if not, we'll move to the draft outline for amendments to the Christchurch Central Recovery Plan for the multi-use arena. It might be the same person. No, it's not.
Through you, Mayor, we do have,
Yes.
Jo Daly here, we do have Joanna Norris and her presentation ready to go.
Okay, well, it's a joint presentation with Dawn Baxendale, so we've got both of those here. So if we could proceed to the economic recovery update, could somebody assist the resolution of the verbal update from Mary Richardson, and we'll move on to the economic recovery update. Thank you.
Brilliant. Members, can you see the presentation on your screens? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Yes, that's fine.
And Joanna, are you there?
I am. Yep, ready when you are, Dawn. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Morning,
Yes.
Joanna.
Yes, we can hear.
Morning. Kia ora.
Morena.
Good morning. Can you go to slide 2, please, Jo? I think you've jumped a slide.
That is slide 2, I think. Isn't it?
That is slide 2 that we have in the presentation.
Sorry, I'm thinking of an earlier version. My apologies. My brain is working on many different levels, as I'm sure you'll appreciate at the moment. I'd like Joanna to start off, but I'll just set the scene for you, for members, and then she'll take us through the presentation. It is important, as we discussed last week at Council, that we are in a position as a city, as a sub-region and as a region to make sure we are ready for recovery. In order to understand that, we need to understand the impacts that we are likely to face, and then to think through carefully about how we can move through the recovery phases. This presentation, devised by Christchurch NZ, the Chief Executive and myself working very closely together in the last week, is to outline how we believe the recovery work can move ahead from an economic perspective. So I'd like to hand over to Joanna Norris, the Chief Exec of Christchurch NZ.
Thank you, Dawn, and kia ora, members, and also to members of the public who are tuning in for this, and thank you for your interest. So as Dawn has outlined, the purpose of today is to update members and the public on the progress towards drafting of the city's economic recovery planning, which, as Dawn has indicated, is in partnership with a range of participants across the sub-region and connected to Canterbury economic recovery planning. There's still a great deal to be worked through, and the intent of what we're presenting today is to give you an early and transparent update on the direction of travel and to seek further member input as required. As you can see from the slide in front of you, and as you will know from all of the evidence that you're seeing reported globally, this is a significant shock that is likely to have long-term impact on both our economy and also on society more generally. We've been doing some forecasting over the last 2 to 3 weeks to understand what the impacts will be at a local and sub-regional level, and there's a range of scenarios that are potentially likely to play out. The very best case scenario, which assumes a resumption of normal activity and normal commerce within a short time frame, has negative growth annualised at around -4% over 2020 and through into 21. At the other end of the spectrum, and this is the end of the spectrum that is looking more likely based on the information that we have in front of us, it's likely that GDP growth will remain in double-digit negative growth for a prolonged period of time of up to 2 years. Now that's obviously has some significant flow-on impacts in terms of participation of people in the workforce, which in turn has a number of societal and wellbeing impacts. We're forecasting job losses within the Christchurch economy of between 9,000 and 36,000 over the next 12 months. And again, the reason for that range is at this point there are some unknowns, both in terms of the duration of the lockdown and the ability of individual sectors to respond once we get out of pandemic level 4. The assumptions that we're making at the moment is that there will be significant job losses across the Christchurch community, and we're seeking to do some further deep dives to understand which are the sectors most impacted, in addition to those that we're seeing the immediate impacts within. If we can just move to the next slide. I'm still seeing the scenario. Yeah, there we go. Right, so the other point that's worth noting is that we have experienced significant shocks before, and most notably the Canterbury earthquake sequence of 2010 and 2011, but there are some fundamental differences between both the earthquake shock and the global financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. One of the notable differences is the likely duration and impact and depth of this crisis, which is impacting every sector and all parts of the globe. And the other notable distinction from the earthquake sequence is this is not a physical disruption, and it's not a disruption that has resulted in widespread damage to our physical infrastructure. Rather, it's a health disruption and in turn a social and economic disruption. What we've seen is a very rapid shutdown of the economy, both locally and nationally. And our estimates are that only 35% of Christchurch employees are currently working at full capacity, and they are those that are employed within the essential services. So that means around 64% of our economy is currently not operating at normal capacity, and that has a significant flow on in terms of the amount of resources that are available within the economy. And now the first impact of that is on some of our lowest paid workers and most vulnerable citizens within our Christchurch community. And notably those working in sectors related to tourism, which include retail and hospitality, as well as transport and other service sectors. So we anticipate that this will likely further impact on inequality measures and related wellbeing measures. As you can see from this slide, this is a significant shock on some sectors more than others. The graph on the right-hand side shows you the proportion of the workforce within individual sectors that are currently working. The pink are workers that are currently working, and the red are those that are not. And that's appearing quite small on my screen, so I'll just take a couple of moments to take you through it. The large graph the large bar near the top of the graph is the medical workforce. And you can see large parts of that workforce are still obviously participating and responding to the health crisis. But then if you look at the fifth bar down, that's our travel, employment and personal services sector, which is largely our tourism sector, and 0% of that workforce are currently operating. Equally, if you look down, you can see food and accommodation there, only 20% of the workforce are currently participating in the economy. So this is a significant shock and the longer those sectors are not operating, the more enduring those impacts are. I will note, though, that there is a significant level of uncertainty at this time. There are a lot of questions that we don't have answers to, and the picture is very much still evolving. But I'm not here with only bad news. There is also some good news. The next slide shows a number of strengths that we have within the economy. And one of the things we know about the Christchurch economy, and was notable in terms of our resilience through the quake periods, is that we have a diversified economy. This offers us a number of protections, because as some sectors are impacted, others are less so. Now, the important part of the recovery response is understanding where there is that resilience and where there is the capacity to absorb parts of the workforce that have been disrupted within other sectors. Now, we know we have some current strength within construction, manufacturing, professional services, some strong expertise and large parts of our workforce operating in the health sector, and then more broadly across Canterbury, obviously our primary industries and agriculture notably has some significant resilience within it. We're starting to dive into this further so we can start to make decisions around the sectors that we're going to invest in to ensure a transition of skills and those groups of people who are unemployed into training and into industries where there will be capacity. Moving to the next slide. Now, as we've started our recovery planning work, we've been very clear that we must take a wellbeing approach to this recovery. We know this from our earthquake experiences and also from successful recoveries and international best practice. So there are some fundamentals listed on this slide that we thought it was important to reflect on as we talk about the economic recovery within the context of a broader recovery. Now, I want to be very clear that the work Christchurch NZ is doing in partnership with Christchurch City Council and our other partners is very much focused on their economic recovery, but it must sit within a framework of overall wellbeing that reflects a social recovery, a cultural recovery, and obviously environmental also. It's also important that our recovery planning is done in partnership with central government and also with the private sector and iwi. And our response will only be effective if it's coordinated at a greater Christchurch level because of the interdependencies of our regional and city economies. And it must also be connected to Canterbury recovery planning. It's very important to us as we stage the next phases of recovery that we draw very heavily on the evidence and that we provide the right insights to you as policy and decision makers to enable you to make good evidence-based decisions. And the final two principles are the international evidence shows us that the public sector needs to take a strong leadership position in response to shocks of this nature and needs to invest and lead with confidence, which in turn will build private sector confidence. It's really important that the public sector take their leadership role very seriously and also make strong investment decisions to signal the intent of recovery. And finally, we're very fortunate in that we have a framework that does support a long-range approach to wellbeing, and that is the Greater Christchurch 2050 framework. And we see a real opportunity to utilise that to help enhance and further the work that we are already doing collectively across the sub-region. So the recovery planning is falling into three main phases. The first phase is that we are in now, and that's the immediate response that we need to undertake to support business and the economy and society more generally to survive this period. As you've seen from the previous graphs, this is a significant shock with immediate impacts on people's livelihoods. That work is being led by central and local government and in partnership with business to support business. The second phase coincides with that time when we move out of lockdown and parts of our economy are able to reactivate and start refunctioning. So that's that phase two. It focuses on tactical short and medium term actions that will support businesses to get back operating and support consumers to start spending within the economy. Phase three focuses on large strategic pieces of activity that will support medium and long-term recovery. Now, these need to be aligned with a long-term vision of where we're taking, where we're leading the region to go, and they need to be designed to be coordinated across the region. So there's a really consistent approach and consistent engagement with central government. Moving to the next slide, which outlines these streams of recovery. Broadly, the work and the direction of travel can fall within four broad streams. The first is support for our business community to ensure that people's livelihoods and jobs are protected to the extent possible. The second is an infrastructure-led approach to recovery that seeks to prioritise the infrastructure projects that can really stimulate economic growth. Now, we know from the Christchurch experience that the building of infrastructure and investment in infrastructure provides a very strong stimulus. We saw that post-quake, but we also know that investment in infrastructure in and of itself is not entirely sufficient, and we must invest in long-term transformation of the economy to ensure that we're activating the infrastructure that we build through this next period. Otherwise, you lose that stimulus effect once the facilities are built. So that leads into stream three, which is the strategic economic development program. And this is designed to ensure that we are transitioning people into the areas of the economy that are going to flourish, that we're addressing the short and long-term unemployed, and that we're doing that in partnership with the private sector and with the tertiaries who can offer training to support people to transition into the next phase of their careers. This is also the phase within which we invest in industry clusters and look to support innovation growth and jobs creation within clusters that present growth opportunities for the future. And then the fourth part is, of course, reactivating both our visitor economy that is heavily impacted and also our community. Our community are our strongest ambassadors through this period, and the more that we can sustain healthy and flourishing communities, the more that feeds through to a strong economy. So this work falls into several phases. We've given you some indication of the type of work that falls within each phases to help paint the picture of what this can look like within each of the phases. So there's already a significant amount of work underway within phase one, some outstanding work that's occurring between the chambers and Christchurch NZ and economic development agencies across the Canterbury region, putting business advisors and mentors in place in partnership with central government to support businesses through this period. I got the latest set of figures back this morning, and we've triaged more than 2,000 businesses over the last 2 weeks through either one-on-one contacts or through workshops. And if you just think about that for a moment, that's 2,000 businesses reaching out in various states of distress because they have had immediate impacts as a consequence of COVID-19. So the team across the Chamber and Christchurch NZ and our partners are worked off their feet on this, but it's incredibly valuable support. We're also able to offer them subsidies to help them access the professional services that they need at this time, and that is being seen as a really valuable program to individual businesses. Council, as you know, has passed the rates mitigation programs for both business and residents, and again, that is essential support at this point of the recovery process. If I can move to phase two. So phase two coincides with that time when we're wanting to start to reactivate parts of the economy, and that will be a phased approach to reactivating our local economy and local consumer spending through to domestic, and then in time trans-Tasman and long-haul activation. Parts of this are economic development work that will feel very familiar to you. This is the type of work that we were doing pre-COVID. So business events attraction, major event stimulation to get people coming into the region and spending money, and then community action through both community events and things that we do within the community to support connectedness, community engagement, and a general sense of wellbeing. And through to phase three. Phase three is really about the big strategic decisions that we will make as a city and a region to stimulate long-term recovery. Now, it's essential that this work is coordinated with central government because there are many levers that are held at central government level and there are levers that are held at local government level. The types of work that are sitting within this phase include the infrastructure and capital works prioritisation that is already underway, and that's a conversation between the Christchurch City Council and central government. Christchurch NZ is reframing its entire work program to focus very squarely on job creation and also job retention. And this is about rebounding the economy as quickly as we can, focusing on growing jobs, transitioning people back into training and work, stimulating innovation, and attracting the types of people and business that we need here to sustain us through this next period of recovery. We're also working with central government on making sure we understand what's happening within the workforce, and we've got all of the right insights to understand who's unemployed, what skills they have, and where they can transition to. There are pieces of work being done to understand how we best utilise the land that we have available to us as a city and the assets that we have available to us, and ensuring that we are making the best use of those assets. And then finally, the work that we do with industry to bring together industry clusters to make sure that industry is best equipped to support itself to recover and to maximise access to opportunities. That is both the supernode work that we were doing pre-COVID, but now with a very intensive focus also on the sectors that need urgent support and urgent help through this period. And then the final piece that I wanted to give you visibility of is the Economic Recovery Advisory Forum that we are pulling together to make sure that we've got the very best insights and access to information from the experts who have been through this process before or who have a contribution to make. So we're pulling together the Economic Advisory Forum, which will be chaired by Dawn. It's designed to connect key partners and experts to support this recovery. Those forum members will provide input into the development of the plan and the next stages as we continue to develop this work. We'll draw on their expertise, but they also will have a role in disseminating information back out to the very wide range of stakeholders who have an interest in this work and can support us as we develop it. It's our intention to cast the net wide with this forum and then to draw from that specific expertise and working groups to support us with particular pieces of work as we need that. Now we're aiming to get the invites out next week and really open to any feedback that you can give us to support that process. So the next steps, there are many knowns and unknowns still at this point. So we're continuing to monitor the progress of the health response, including the lockdown timeframes to help determine the staging and deadlines for the next steps. We're continuing to build the evidence base to make sure that we've got the right data to determine our response. And as I say, really important that we do make these decisions based on clear information, international best practice and local data to inform our decisions. As I said, we'll be standing up the Recovery Advisory Forum and we'll be continuing engagement with our partners at city, regional, national level, the Chamber of Commerce and the private sector more broadly. And then there's just a lot of work that we're getting on with right now, which is that phase 1 work, which is short-term, tactical, absolute survival activity to support our economy through this immediate crisis phase. So, kia ora, thank you all for listening. I also thank you all to the members of the public who are sitting in your homes and in this very strange and extraordinary circumstance that we're working in. We appreciate your interest and your support. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. And I'm going to go around the council table as I did last time. I know people have sent notes through, but I actually thought it was much more effective to do that. But I just wanted to clarify a couple of things before we do that. First of all, one of your slides talked about pandemic level 3 and when New Zealand returns, and I think that we need to be very aware that the government has said that it may be regional, and you know, from my reading of the situation is that Canterbury is doing relatively well, so I think we should be thinking about the possibility that you know, Canterbury as a region could be in level 3, but maybe not the rest of the country, or elements of the country or parts of the country might be in that. And then we might get to level 3, but actually something might happen and we might be back to level 4. So I think everyone said that this is not a linear process, that will be in and out. So would you like to comment on that? Because I think there has to be flex within whatever it is that you're developing, and so that people can really clearly understand that this is going to be ever changing. And the second part of that is that, you know, I really do think that scenario planning in this environment is core critical, and so I'm wondering whether it's the Economic Recovery Forum that have got some, you know, sort of kind of future thinkers sitting in behind that are giving that feedback into you, so that you've got a group of people who are kind of separate from the hands-on environment, but are actually thinking way more broadly about, you know, what this might mean. I mean, we might not be accepting international tourism, for example, until there's a worldwide vaccine that is able to prevent the spread of this virus. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mira, absolutely endorse both of those points. It's essential that we're able to pivot quickly and respond very quickly to a very, very fast-changing situation. We've demonstrated that to this point, where we've had to respond very quickly as we moved from what was effectively level 3 2 weeks ago through to level 4, and then, as you say, anticipating the next stages of that and knowing that we may go backwards and forwards at a regional level. The other point is around the scenario planning. Absolutely agree, and I think it's important to have both the futurists guiding and inputting knowledge, and also the old hands. There are many, many people who have a great deal of recovery experience in our community, and it's been a real privilege to know that we can draw on all of that expertise that we've got. That makes Canterbury incredibly well placed, in my view.
And the other one was one of your slides focused on infrastructure and capital works program, and you talked about the role of central and local government in that regard, which I totally agree with. But there's also the private sector with public benefit projects sitting in there as well. And perhaps you'd like to give us a bit of an update of where they're thinking in that regard.
Yeah, so we've been speaking to the developer community, as have our other partner agencies over the last 2 weeks. They've all given us an indication of what they need to unlock their specific projects and the way that they believe they support a public benefit. So we've really challenged the developer community to think about that and to understand the kind of criteria that we'll be looking for as a public sector to stimulate and understand how their work can stimulate this. And that's an ongoing conversation, but I'm really pleased with the level of engagement that we've had to this point.
Brilliant. And just in that context, there was something else that I've kind of, could you just describe more so for the public that might be tuning in, just who you're talking about when you say your partners, you're talking to your partners, so that, and your partners are talking to the private sector as well. So perhaps could you describe the partners?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a range of partnerships. There's obviously, we work lockstep with the Christchurch City Council as your economic development agency. Regenerate Christchurch have a great deal of expertise, and the team there have been essential in providing inputs, have the CCHL group and all of the subsidiaries of CCHL. So we're very fortunate to have that strength within the city family. And then more broadly, the Chamber of Commerce, we work in a formal partnership with the Chamber and also with economic development agencies in the broader region, including Enterprise in North Canterbury and down into South Canterbury as well. And then there's the private sector entities who we communicate with frequently and we get inputs from, and we've been talking with a range of those private sector partners. And then of course the Greater Christchurch Partnership, which brings together the leadership from across the region, again has been really fundamental in terms of providing input and helping steer our direction of travel at a city level. That's lovely. Look, thank you. And then there's the whole whole central government as well, NZTE, yes. MB, MHUD, a huge range of partners. So lots of Zoom calls, but all really valuable. Yeah. I seem to be just as busy, well, if not busier than I was before in terms of Zoom meetings. They sort of do feature in my life now. And I think that's the case right across New Zealand. Look, I'll just run through the councillors. So Councillor Jimmy Chen, have you got a question?
Yes, thank you. Yes, my question is based on Norris and on the presentation regarding to the economic advisory forum, who on behalf of community group to participate in this forum.
I'm sorry, Jimmy, you just dropped out at the start of that question. It was about who is participating in the forum. Was it a specific?
It was specifically focused on the community. Who from the community is represented on the forum? And I just wonder also if that links into the wider, recovery plan, which has to be the social, the cultural, and the environmental as well.
Yeah, so we're working through the membership of the forum at the moment, and I'd prefer not to call out specific entities at this point, other than to say we're intending very broad representation from the community, from iwi, from Pacifica leaders, and then from the specific industries that are strong within the Christchurch economy. So and also a number of central government partners, such as the Office of Ethnic Affairs, which is an important part of the link through to communities.
Okay. A second question is You mentioned have already been contacted for about 2,000 business and one-on-one contact. I just want to know how many or how much percentage engage with those different cultural group. They're running their business and also have a suffering at the moment.
Look, I don't have a breakdown based on ethnicity of the business owners that are contacting us, but what I do know is that a large proportion are small and medium enterprises who wouldn't otherwise have access to professional services or to support within their own organisations.
Thank you. Okay, that's my questions.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. Catherine Chu?
No questions from me, but I do want to thank you, Joanna, for all the work that you've put into this and for that comprehensive presentation you've just made. It is worrying and concerning. We are in worrying and concerning times, but it is reassuring that we have the experience and the data to work towards recovery with a wellbeing focus to it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. Melanie Coker?
Thanks, Joanna. I've got a question in the slide that was about phase one. And one of the lines towards the bottom mentions about rent relief to tenants in council family properties. So could you explain that a little bit more?
Yes, sorry, I realise that language there is opaque. That's commercial tenants that are within properties that are either owned or leased by council companies.
Okay.
And particularly
so that was
those
the decision
that are, for instance, tourism
week.
businesses. Yeah, it was a decision from last week. And there's also both Christchurch NZ, DCL, and I believe parts of CCHL are also an opportunity to extend that same rent relief.
Okay, thanks, Joanna.
Oh, sorry, Pauline Cotter.
Were you on mute? Thank you. What a fantastic presentation, Joanna. Thank you so much. It gives us our baseline right now, and that's going to change moment by moment, as you have indicated as well. And you mentioned that the first impact has been on the lowest paid workers, mainly in retail and hospitality, although perhaps not necessarily for the supermarket workers and some other retail workers that are still going. Would we, I know we don't have a crystal ball, but would we expect perhaps a decent spring back in hospitality with people wanting to get out and perhaps wanting to support their local cafes and things and restaurants and things? Would that be a fair point?
Look, I think, it certainly will be people who, assuming they still have the resources within their family units to spend, who will want to reactivate. I certainly am looking forward to my next barista-made coffee. But we are heavily reliant on international tourism to support large parts of our hospitality sector and equally domestic tourism. And whilst domestic may return reasonably quickly once we're out of this next phase, and certainly as we drop down to level 2, international visitation won't return for a long time.
Right, thank you, that makes that clear. Thank you very much.
James Daniels.
Kia ora, Joanna. Either my screen has gone all wonky or your head's got bigger. But
it's not my head.
Thank you for your work. You said that you've had about 2,000 small businesses approach you. What's the most common request?
It's really interesting, James. It's changed over the past 3 weeks. So in the initial week, it was all about the wage subsidy and how to access that. And then it moved in the second week, still about the wage subsidy, but then into queries about how to manage employment relationships, and particularly for businesses who were needing to offboard staff. And then more recently, and as we're in week 3, the queries are starting to focus on how to access finance, bridging loan finance, and the government-backed loan scheme.
Okay. Well, I support, and I'm pleased that we've got your agency in our city and our community, but I don't want to see us duplicating resources or resources that are available from central government. We've got to be careful of that, because this is going to cost us a lot as ratepayers to get out of this. Okay, so just want to put that note of caution in there. But I appreciate and support what you're doing.
Do you mind if I speak directly to that through you?
Please, I actually think that it's a good idea, because I was going to say but there is an answer to that in terms of the relationship with the Chamber of Commerce and the funding that you're getting for that.
Yeah, correct. So we are very, very clear that we will not duplicate activity that can be carried out either by the private sector or is carried out by government. But what we do is work in a partnership with both the Chamber of Commerce and other participants and central government, and we're the delivery arm for a number of central government services on a funded basis that is not funded by the ratepayer. So it's funded by central government and we deliver on their behalf. So there is no duplication, and believe you me, if there was, I would be stamping it out, because I need every dollar I can right now.
Cool. Thank you, Joanna.
It might actually be a useful follow-up, Joanna, if you could provide that detail about the funding for the advice that you're giving in that regard, because I think that would give people reassurance in that regard, and also public reassurance in that regard, that the duplication isn't there, because I'm confident that it's not as well. So thank you for that. Mike Davidson.
Kia ora, Joanna. Thanks for that presentation. It was really good. I guess we don't know exactly what the new normal will be, and as you have alluded to, the time frames around long haul flights, we just don't know. Even getting the Trans-Tasman stuff back online. So I guess what's the risk of leaping to solutions for our city recovery before we actually have the evidence?
It's such a good question. The risk is very high, Mike, that we'll make the wrong decisions, or we'll make decisions that are not strategic but feel right in the moment. So it's important that the things that we do now are responding to the urgent need, and that we're putting in place solutions for businesses and for the community based on what they're telling us they need. So we've been surveying businesses, and we are very careful that when we put in place solutions, it actually responds to the needs that they are identifying. And then the other point is some of the long-term strategic decisions we make around the prioritisation of our resource and the intervention by local government need more information, and we need to make sure that we are reflecting on international best practice that is then contextualised for our local economy. And we're working as fast as we can to produce insights to provide through to you to enable you to make those decisions, but I would urge caution around any short-term instincts that are not based on the evidence.
Thank you. And I guess as we move forward and we try to obviously get the economy back up and running, it's important that we don't fall back towards status quo, especially where there was areas of our economy that just weren't right. And I guess there's an opportunity to have a bit of a step change looking forward.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at this purely as a theoretical exercise, it's fascinating. It's fascinating to start to gauge what our future economy could look like and where the potential lies. It's of course not a theoretical exercise, because there are real pain points as we move through to this transformation of our economy. So we need to be making sure that we're taking into account the real pain points right now, but really thinking about what type of economy do we want? What does a sustainable economy look like? What does sustainable economic development look like? And they are questions that I'm acutely interested in working through the answers to.
I think you're hearing from councillors, and I endorse that entirely, is that that's a journey that we need to take our community on, and we need to enable them to lead the way, because that's just so much a lesson learned from our earthquake experience. And although this isn't the physical disruption of an earthquake, it is far more deep and fundamental, and it is an opportunity to rethink our future in a way that we did with Share an Idea, as a concept for rebuilding our city centre, but this is actually about changing our way of life, and that does present opportunity. And I think we had a conversation that we started to have as a council last week around recovery planning, and this is why it's so essential that we're thinking of the future in a way that engages all of our communities in that conversation, so that no one's left out, because there is no one good idea that's going to solve our future. It's very much up in the air, and it's something that we've all got to be ready to sort of support the development of. So as you say, the economy sits within a wider conversation, so it's a really good point for Mike to raise. Anne Galloway.
Kia ora. Thanks so much, Joe, for that great information. I had a couple of questions really about the importance of community or consumer spending in the recovery, and I guess that this really speaks into the whole rates discussion that we're having at the moment. How important is it for people to have money in their pockets to be able to spend?
It's very important, and the greatest way to sustain money in people's pockets is ensuring that they have employment. And I think that the more we can do as the public sector to protect employment and to make it easy for businesses to operate in Christchurch and for businesses to do their jobs, and then in turn employ people and give them jobs, the better, because that is what continues to fuel the economy is discretionary income that comes as a consequence of employment.
Thank you. And a second question, you talked about retraining and different pathways for people to get into different employment. How have the pathways started to be developed, and how will people know about those retraining opportunities?
Yeah, really, really interesting question. Early days, we're working with MSD and MB on answering exactly those questions. What platforms do we need to give people access to local information, and also with the tertiaries, with ARA, UC, Lincoln and University of Otago, to make sure we give as much visibility to the opportunities to retrain, and that we're prioritising the right type of retraining. This conversation has started. In fact, it was a detailed conversation that was occurring pre-COVID as a consequence of the supernodes work we had been doing, but now it's got a post-COVID focus.
Thank you.
Thank you. James Goff.
Thanks, Joanna. I wouldn't normally re-ask this, but because you spoke to it when we spoke earlier in the week, but I thought your answer was superb, and you didn't touch on it so much in this presentation. And that was really just along the themes of the fact that this isn't like the earthquake where it's unique to Christchurch. It's not the whole of New Zealand's in lockdown, the rest of the world's in lockdown. But what thinking is Christchurch, New Zealand specifically doing at this point in time to ensure that we can be smart and strategic and ensure that Christchurch is ahead of the curve when we're on the other side of this pandemic?
Yeah, well, I think this is where we've got a real regional advantage, in that we have been through this before, and while some of the challenges are different, the great many of them are the same. So we know what recovery looks like. We also know where the pain points in recovery occur. And for me, some of the things we reflected on earlier about making sure that we put the community at the heart of it, making sure we do it in genuine partnership, make sure we're communicating early and often, and telling people when we know things and when we don't. That we know all of that. It's in our DNA as a region, because we've responded to events prior to. But it's also critically important that we do this in lockstep with central government, because a great many of the levers sit at central government, and if it's not a true partnership, then we're not able to really implement that on behalf of our community. And then the final point I would make is that all of the strengths that we had as a consequence of the earthquake, so brand new infrastructure, a beautiful city, beautiful high value amenity, and a beautiful connection to the wider South Island, all of that remains for us. And that's a really powerful and valuable platform that we have to launch off. We don't have the same infrastructure challenges that other cities have and still have in this post-COVID environment. So we're in a very fortunate position. We need to be strong and we're confident, and we need to come out hard and fast, speaking to the opportunities of Christchurch and Canterbury.
No, I really appreciate that, and I think our response, it has been a staunch and swift, and arguably a very strong response. But it looks like we could be very well placed, perhaps even China as well, but specifically New Zealand, to be a good place for investment from a risk mitigation point of view. There is every opportunity for us to capitalise on that.
Exactly right.
Thanks, Joanna.
Yeah, and I think that also speaks to the fact that there will be others looking to us for advice and support, so that they can share our lessons that we learned from our earthquake recovery experience, both the good and the bad, the things we got really well done,
exactly.
but also the things that went wrong as well. So
totally agree.
Yeah. But that speaks to a wider recovery conversation that I'm working on some further advice on. Jana Johansson.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Just several questions. One was I was just trying to get some sense of what Christchurch NZ is doing to save money in terms of the things that would no longer be happening. So things like the events, the big international sporting things that we were bidding on or attracting. Can you just give us some sense of what you're not doing to sort of put the resource into helping the businesses that need that immediate support that you've talked about?
So we've gone through a large reprioritisation exercise within the organisation, where the work that's most impacted at this point is our international work that we're doing with the international trade community, and any events that we had that were coming up in this immediate period. We're very fortunate that all of our major events are scheduled for either later in the year or next year, so they're not impacted at this point, so we're not needing to pull a resource away from that. Those that are impacted, and there's a number of business events that are impacted by the situation at Tapai, we're now looking to reschedule those into 2021. So again, it's important that we make sure that we've got the resource available to come out hard and fast, and that we're not turning off that investment in the future. Most of our major events work long timelines, so we're bidding now for and are still through this period for activity in 2023, 2024 and beyond. So that's unimpacted.
Do we, I mean, I guess it's a bit like the point that Mike was making earlier, that I'm a little bit concerned that we are putting a lot of resource into something like a recovery that's not going to happen in the time frame that we think. And again, that was one of the lessons after the earthquake. So at what point do we kind of get some sense of, take the Women's Cricket World Cup, for example, that's no longer going ahead, and we're better to redirect resource that was allocated to it into that more immediate, keeping those jobs or finding new jobs for people?
Yeah, so we are in negotiations with all of the event partners that we have where we think the event might be impacted, and we're looking to retain those events in Christchurch because they're important for attracting both international audiences and domestic visitation for years beyond those at which they were scheduled.
Right, okay. And just the final question from me really was, there's been some commentary around the impact on the Māori economy. I think Radio New Zealand said about 500 million impact, but there's different things that are being discussed in terms of, especially, I guess, tourism. So I was just trying to understand in terms of what we're doing locally to work with the Māori and Pacifica communities around, I guess, not just the economic impact, but the wellbeing impact that you've talked about at the start, because it just doesn't seem to have much visibility, and yet it seems something that's a kind of emerging thing that just seems to be coming up in the media quite regularly now, that they were really impacted, way back with the influenza, and obviously with everything that we're focused in terms of moving forward as a city, that's a huge part of our narrative, but there's just no visibility to what's going on there.
Yeah, no, it's a hugely important issue. Ngāi Tahu are part of the Greater Christchurch Partnership, which is one of the fundamental vehicles for developing this work. And my expectation is that there will be a heavy focus on the recovery of the Māori economy in particular, for the reasons that you've outlined. It's also worth noting that entities like Ngāi Tahu Tourism have been significantly impacted by this event, and their recovery is going to be important to ensure that we have a sustainable tourism economy following on from this.
Okay. Thanks very much, Yanni. Aaron Kewen.
Yeah, morning, Joanna, and thanks for the presentation. So I jotted down some notes as we went. The first one I want to start on is the shock on the economy graph. Versus the notes that go with it. If an outsider was to come in and read that, they would look and think, oh my goodness, that's quite a shock on the economy. But the graph is essential services versus total employment. But if you look at something like education, which is a full red bar, as far as I'm aware, there, other than the private education sector, but all the public education sector is still being fully paid. So the shock on the economy is not that they're not employed, they're just not at work per se. So I don't know how helpful a graph like this is, would be my question.
Thank you for that feedback. The purpose of the graph is to indicate where we're at this point in time, and obviously this is evolving, and very quickly parts of our workforce will return. In particular, I think if you have a look at the bullet point alongside it, health, government and education are predominantly supported by fiscal spending by government, so will be largely insulated through this period, we would expect, with the exception of the private providers, as you've noted.
Right. So going forward, it would be really good to have a loss versus gain graph, and probably updated quite regularly, because the changes will be there, so we can see in the economy where the jobs are actually lost. And we won't really know till we get outside the wage subsidy, the 12 weeks, because that's when the businesses will just close their doors, a number of, but others will be opening up. And one of them, for instance, is the screen industry, because there'll be a boom later this year. It's whether Christchurch becomes a part of that. Currently, Canterbury's 12% of the population, but gets 1% of the screen industry. And Yanni's point before around the Māori and Pacific economy, Māori and Pacific are overrepresented in the screen and performance arts. So it's a great way to grow employment for Māori and Pacific, as well as that entire industry, if we get in front of it early. Is there any work being done there?
Yeah, I'll just, before I get to the creative economies, the work our economists are doing at the moment is to drill in the specific industry impacts. We've just released, or are about to release today, a report on the impact on the manufacturing sector, and we're going sector by sector, and then the intention is to pull that together into a comprehensive view of the impact across all sectors. So that work's underway, and the early indications I'm seeing is exactly as I've said. There is uneven impact across sectors, and that means that there's some sectors where we have the opportunity to transfer parts of the workforce. With respect to the creative economies, couldn't agree more that there's a real opportunity within our creative economies, both with respect to screen and the creative economies more generally. Again, as a consequence of our Quake experience, we know that the response from the creative community was fundamental, not only to in terms of getting people participating and out and engaging with one another, but also in terms of overall wellbeing, and wellbeing supports the economy. And I just, those of you who were in Christchurch at the time, I think you'll all remember that first festa that ran when large parts of our CBD were locked down, and just the power of those lanterns on that dark night when, you know, we'd lost so much, I think is that will remain with me for life.
Yeah, okay. Totally agree, and it would be good, because there will be a boom, especially in screen, with people being locked down and consuming everything possibly available. So there will be growth there. So obviously the government are currently looking, their approach to the economic recovery, and it's not like an earthquake recovery, it's an economic recovery only, is Keynesian economics. So it's spend your way out of a hole. So there's two problems at the moment. There's debates going around at the moment in the private and public sector around wage cuts, and they just hurt the economy. That takes everything backwards because that's disposable income that people are no longer spending, so they don't get a coffee, they don't go out for dinner, so it's a spiralling effect downwards. First, are you as an organisation looking to enter that debate on the pros and cons of it, because it's a big debate that's being had? And then the other one is, until the world's a perfect place, there'll always be jobs. It's just who organises those jobs and when is the other massive debate. And the government are obviously going to try and spend their way out. So how much impact will you have as an organisation on that as well? And that's the end of my questions, is those two big ones.
Such a great question. As an agency and public servants, we're not going to enter into an ideological or philosophical discussion, but we will provide the evidence in terms of what has worked internationally and what role government plays in terms of providing stimulus post-shock.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Sam McDonald.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. Look, I just wondered, I mean, firstly, I agree entirely with what James Daniel said. I'm always nervous about duplication. And I think if we can have an ongoing assurance that you're doing everything to mitigate that, that would be really useful. The second one is, can you just talk me through how we measure your success, or I guess the targets, and what can be in place around the strategy? And I'm not sure if at the same time Dawn may have some comments on how we monitor that, because I think, I like the work you've done. I'd just like to see how we can monitor that and track, success or achievement.
So I'll leap in and then hand over to you, Dawn. So you monitor our success through our statement of intent process, where we set targets and then we measure against those and we report back to the Finance and Performance Committee of the whole. So there's a formal mechanism which is mandated under the Local Government Act and the Public Finance Act. We're obviously needing to revisit the targets within the the draft statement of intent for the coming financial year because of the global shock. So that's the technical monitoring of our success. More broadly, though, this economic recovery planning work is cross-city and cross-region, and it's as this develops, it will be important to come to a consensus across the city and region on the targets that we're setting. Now, 2050, partly the Greater Christchurch 2050 work that's underway is moving towards that, but until we get those clear targets and direction from elected members such as yourselves, we do need to benchmark.
So to add to that as well, Joanna is absolutely right, and members will recall we had already done our letters of expectation to Christchurch XZ and CCHL, and we had changed the emphasis already in our original discussions so that we were focusing on more tangible outcomes, and Joanna and I had already been working very closely on defining those for them to be able to come back to council. In light of the period we are now going through, we will continue to refine that, but I would strongly advise that it needs to be in two types of measures. It needs to be quantitative. We need to be able to measure certain things, but there will also be qualitative measures as well. There will be immediate impacts and there will be longer term impacts that we cannot necessarily define in quantitative measures at this point, but we should be clear about the sense of direction that we have. And I can say this, members, having taken a city out of recession and being very brave at a point in time when everybody else was shutting up shop, we were actually projecting out into the wider world, because of taking the opportunities at the right time is key to get ahead of the game.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I guess I completely accept the statement of intent stuff. What I'm really keen to see is, Joanna and Dawn and the team put together something that we can actually monitor it against. So I just think if you can factor that into your discussions, that'd be really useful.
We're already doing that, Sam.
Thank you for that, and I think that's going to be an important part of that whole recovery approach, because it won't just be economic, it will be the social, cultural and environmental wrapped up as a package with the community at the heart of it. So but that's still work in progress, but we're on track. I don't know that any other council in the country is is as far ahead in terms of looking at all of these issues across the board as we are, and that runs off the back of last week and all of the work that Christchurch NZ is doing. So thanks for that, Sam. I think it's core critical that we have those milestones so that we can actually measure progress in a very deliberate and definitive way. Jake McClellan.
No question for me, just thanks Joanna and for all your hard work and keeping your eye on the ball, so to speak.
Oh, sorry, Jake, I'm going to suggest that you think about how you structure your monitor so that because it seems to be moving. I don't know if you're holding a phone or something like that, but we'll take that offline, and during the break perhaps you can get some advice from the technical people. Phil Major.
Right, can you hear me, guys?
Yes, we
Hello?
can.
Right. Joe, thank you very much for your presentation. That's great. There's a lot of questions there that you have answered very well. I know I've struggled with some of them. I think we're very lucky to have people of the calibre like you and Dawn who are working together very well on this to get it going. I like to see that. I'd like to hear that you're all over, that you're looking after every dollar you get and you don't want to do any duplication. You've got my full support on that. And also, as a council, we've got to try and prioritise as much as we can what we put forward to the government, because this time we won't have the luxury, if you want to say it, of other contractors coming from out of town. It will all be spent on contractors in town. So the money will all be here in our economy. So we get money into the truck driver, the painter, the concrete man, everyone's pocket, so they can go out and buy their coffee or whatever they want. So well done and carry out the good work. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Tim Scandrett.
Thank you, and thank you, Joanna, to you and your teams for the work they're doing. Just a couple of things. We got your U1 trends, which was a huge coup, and those types of things have been put on hold or cancelled or going to be rescheduled. But when we're looking at those things, and I guess an advantage is that these things will be a global trend which we can watch, and that it usually is for us a trickle down because we are at the bottom of the world. But when we're talking about, say, the cruise ship industry, for instance, which everyone's saying it's going to totally change, we're looking at building a cruise berth. If we're looking at timing, is there going to be any work with your team with regards to if we are going to look at an opportunity, or it seems there is an opportunity to look at a film complex here in the screen industry, because I know that a lot of big releases, big films are waiting to be released, but they were all put on hold and they are waiting for this to pass, because there's obviously no point in putting these out when they've got to earn hundreds of millions of dollars to pay for all those big stars in Hollywood. So I guess the question would be, would you be looking and your teams be looking at opportunities there? Because if we come out of this ahead of the game, and there is always a risk there. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to hand this one to Dawn, and just before I do, I'll just note that Screen Canterbury NZ, which is we deliver on your behalf, is very strongly of the view that there is a strong content pipeline, a strong opportunity, and we need the appropriate facilities to support that. But the Christchurch City Council is doing a lot of good work in the background on this, so I might just hand over to Dawn to answer that one.
So I completely agree with both Aaron and Tim. There are undoubtedly opportunities. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. There are undoubtedly opportunities around certain industry sectors, and creative industries and films is one of those. It's finding the right sites and making sure we put the package together in a proper way. And it may very well be there is more than one opportunity as well that we need to be considering.
Thank you. And the final one is looking around the country, and I know that Bar Plenty, etc., they have a huge horticultural industry which is very labour intensive. We don't have such a labour intensive economy down here, but we have wineries in North Canterbury, etc., and that's just one of the things. And it's would there be any, or is there any thought about looking at people who have, say, lost their jobs or may lose their jobs, to look at diversifying into those areas and possibly bus them to, whether they're an accountant or whatever they do, if it's the work's not there but they've still got to feed the family, is there any work being done with things like that?
Yeah, well, yes and no. Not the physical transfer of staff, but certainly the transfer of their skills into training and into industry. And the Canterbury Mayoral Forum is also looking at work that will support that skills transfer. But I will note that the agriculture sector and primary industries are, we anticipate will show real resilience through this period and will continue to underpin our regional economy.
Yeah, look, thank you, Jen. It's going to be fascinating to see how quickly, and if at all, with regards to change in travel, conference industry, tourism, etc., comes back, especially with people being conscious of the energy used to travel, etc. So it'll be fascinating to see, especially now that the central government spent a huge amount of money. We don't want to end up with a whole lot of really gorgeous looking warehouses. Cheers.
Thank you. Dawn, did you want to contribute to the answer to that?
Yes, please, Mayor. I think the other thing that will be important, because obviously we're talking to businesses through our Economic Development Agency, what we need is the labour market analysis. It isn't just about where the jobs are going, but where there is demand in certain sectors that require jobs, and then we can match those things together so we start to create a pipeline of opportunity for our people in the city who need jobs.
Thank you.
And again, just speaking to the duplication issue, Chamber of Commerce is actually taking a core critical role in looking at those manufacturers that are able to repurpose to specific needs right now, and they are also taking on board where there are skill shortages or shortages in the workforce as a result of production actually ramping up in some sectors. And of course, we are the food basket of the country, and there is a lot of work happening. I was speaking to one of the big producers here in Christchurch, but obviously with growing happening out in the region, and there is a need for workers who come from similar sectors who've got the skill sets, forklift drivers, the various things that, and so the private sector is really stepping up and playing a good role of coordination in that regard. So, we don't have to do things for people. We should be a facilitator and an enabler. That's the whole purpose of the recovery approach and the partnership approach. You put the work in and the coordination function where it sits most naturally. You build on your strengths. You don't create something new or a function for local government that doesn't need to come over here. And the other part of that is that the private sector has been doing this thinking since they realised they were going to essentially be out of business. So a very large company that has hotels and call centres for travel immediately was able to make their hotels available for seasonal workers and able to get people from their casual workforce out picking fruit in this harvest season. So if anyone's watching from outside, there is plenty of picking work to do, and I'm thinking up in the Marlborough area, but there'll be other parts of the country as well that are looking for a workforce that is capable of moving into that area very, very quickly. So there's a lot of jobs in those areas where production is literally booming because this is the time of the year of harvest. So I'll move on. There's Sarah Templeton.
Kia ora. Thank you for that, Joanna, and Dawn for your contributions. And just want to reiterate what Catherine and others have said about how good it is to have that expertise here to be able to give us that sort of advice at a time like this. 3 questions. The housing market and implications there. It'd be good to see some data at some point on, for example, the impact of lower numbers of B&Bs, Airbnbs, that kind of home share stuff being used.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So I followed that up with the team following our earlier conversations in the week, and there is a bit of a data lag. So we're not able to produce that report immediately, but it's on our research schedule as soon as the data is available.
Yeah, that'd be good, because it's going to have a real impact on what happens in the central city. And while we've got the recovery from COVID-19 to deal with, we've still got that longer term recovery that we were going through with the post-earthquake stuff too. So intensification and things.
We see it as critical that we look at that both in terms of the real estate market, but also the rental market. And there'll be, as people exit the workforce, people will have trouble paying rent, and that's going to have an impact on the rental market.
Yeah, and those sort of ongoing wellbeing impacts on people. So that'll be good. So your the different work streams that you've been going through at the moment and the stuff that you've got planned seems to be quite targeted, and is that your key focus at the moment, making sure that you are really targeting areas for the worst hit and the areas that you can have the biggest impact, rather than just a broad brush let's do everyone approach?
Yeah, we I mean, like everybody, we have limited resources, so we need to understand where we can be most impactful, but also acknowledging that neither Christchurch NZ nor any entity does this on their own, and we've got a small part to play. So what we're really doing as a city is setting a direction of travel that others can work within. So helping people to prioritise their own activity, but collectively working towards a single goal, which is recovery and the retention of jobs.
Yeah, that's great. And I really like Sam's point about that sort of monitoring and getting indicators and those kind of things going. And I understand that's important, not just for you, but I guess for us as a council and governance as well. And what is it, because while you've got the indicators, we're the ones who end up making decisions on things and setting budgets, that kind of stuff. What is it that you need from us to help enable your work, and also to help enable the city to recover in the fullest way possible? What is it you need from us as governors?
Yeah, well, the first thing I think is cohesion, in making sure that we are working collectively with our regional partners across the Greater Christchurch Partnership in a sustained and respectful way. So there's the leadership piece. This dialogue is really important for us because it helps inform our work. You represent the ratepayers and citizens of Christchurch, and continuing to feed into us any insights that you're seeing or feedback that you're getting from your constituencies. And then the final piece is, again, probably just always ensuring that the decisions that you're making are informed by evidence. So you'll seek, if you don't know the answers to questions, seek the answers, because often the answers do sit within the toolkit that you have. And if they don't, we can provide advice on where we can get these answers or why we don't know the answers.
Yeah, so you don't want us jumping to solutions when we don't have all the evidence yet?
Look, every idea is a good idea, but it does need to be properly evaluated. So giving the officials the opportunity to evaluate the very good suggestions that elected members have is great. Yep. We would receive gratefully.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You put that very, very well, Joanna. Andrew Turner. Andrew, are you there, or are you on mute, or have you disappeared?
It was an apology for...
isn't he away?
Oh, right. Okay. Well,
that's all right.
He's back.
I'm off
he's
mute
back.
now.
He has returned.
I have returned. So I have missed some of the discussion, so apologies if my question duplicates something that's already been asked.
I shall tell you if it does.
Thank you. First of all, Joe and Dawn, thanks for the huge amount of work that you're doing and for the speed at which this particular piece of work has been developed. Great to see a joined up approach between the two of you, between Christchurch NZ and Council, and a collaborative approach, of course, with other agencies as well. It's important that we as the elected council remain fully engaged throughout. We'll be particularly interested in what data's telling us and how we respond to this. What will reporting to council and the ability for council to feed back and provide guidance look like? How frequently would you expect to be having these kind of conversations or other conversations with us, so that we remain fully in the loop and we can be providing guidance in what inevitably will be a challenging and dynamic situation?
I'll put that question back to members in some way. I would like as much FaceTime with you, and as would my colleagues across the city, to enable us to make good collective decisions and provide you with the right advice. I think that's really essential, and I think it's also really good for visibility for the public to understand what we're thinking about and what the direction of travel is. So I would value as many opportunities as we can get to get in front of you, to put our expert economists in front of you, and to give you the insights that you need to make decisions. But I will be guided by you, because I also don't want to bore you or to give you more information than you need.
I'm really encouraged by that. Thanks very much indeed for that approach. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll come back to you on that, Joanna, because I think that what you say is absolutely right, and it was one reason for wanting to have this meeting here publicly today, because if the public are able to appreciate just the extent of the work that has to go on in the background while we're in the recovery planning stage, at the same time as in the immediate response stage, I think that they'll start to get an understanding of the flexibility and the nimbleness that's really required, or agility that's really required in such a dynamic environment. So it was a great presentation, but I've had a text from one of my colleagues, which I shouldn't be looking at text messages, but I happened to see it, and that was just, can you just confirm that you're working in collaboration with DCL at the same time as well, because that was one of the partners that you didn't mention.
Yes, so DCL is a subsidiary of CCHL, one of the CCHL companies. So we're working with a number of the CCHL companies, and DCL have provided some expertise in terms of the infrastructure prioritisation.
That's great. Thank you very much. So look, that brings us to the end of the presentation. And I now quickly need to pick up my run sheet, because I didn't have it in front of me, and I don't see that there's a resolution, or do we have a resolution to receive the report? I'm not sure.
Through you, Mayor, yes, a resolution just to receive the progress update on the economic recovery work underway.
Right, well, I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder for that?
I'll second it.
Who was that? Pauline Cotter, sounded like? Was that Pauline?
Yes, it was.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
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 Aye. It's carried. Thank you. It's quite a little run for the...
You're a dialect, Leanne.
We can't hear you, Leanne.
Okay. Make a break. We'll take a break.
Great.
Bye, Joanna.
Go live now.
Well, welcome back to everyone who's watching in today, and we've managed to fix the technical glitch that occurred before, and I'd now like to invite Mary Richardson to give us the COVID-19 incident management team update. Thank you, Mary.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor and Councillors. I'm not going to give a rundown of the situation and the status because you have received situation reports regularly and the environmental scan, plus had a briefing last week and on Tuesday. However, just want to note three things. It appears that the action the country's taking is having an effect. We have seen a drop in new cases over the week. Our fatality rate has dropped to 0.08, which is one of the lowest in the world, and we still have community transmissions only at 2%. As far as I want to report first on what new activities, so it's not the things that have been running, but new activities and changes out of our council EOC, that's Emergency Operations Centre. So in the last couple of days, we have had an increase in the number of people calling our 0800 number. So we are actually receiving well over 100 each day now. We are responding with food and other needs, both by our response team, which is a number of council staff, plus other volunteers, through Student Volunteer Army, where again we have staff working with the Student Volunteer Army, and also through other food bank suppliers. We, over the coming weekend, we will be having more work from the EOC and our staff around the foreign nationals. There's a number of flights coming in over the next number of days to take foreign nationals home, so it will be a busy period there. As you know, that's been done in partnership with the airport and with health and with other agencies. We also will have some inward bound flights coming back to bring people back, and we'll be supporting that with their welfare needs. We now have mentioned earlier that we were doing the outward bound calls to over 70-year-olds living alone in partnership with MSD, and we now have over 40 staff working on those outward bound calls, and we'll increase that number, and that's just to ensure that actually we make early contact with those people and make sure they are well supported, and if they have any other needs, we can cater for them. We have rapidly had a team out today at the request of the National Controller to close all our jetties and some of those pathways around waterways, just to get that social distancing and avoid any risk over the long weekend. So we have had our full parks team out there doing that today, so it's closed in time for tomorrow. So that's the main new or changing patterns across the EOC. We, in terms of the council business as usual and essential services, there's not much update there apart from the fact Three Waters and Waste, they're running as normal, well stood up, but they have now moved to a split shift roster to protect teams, and that's so there's no contact between those teams, and we will always have one team available. We also want to note that there is going to be a high tide over the weekend. We are aware of that and mindful of that, and are actually putting checks and precautionary things in place, but you will see some water on the roads in the eastern suburbs, or may see, are likely to see, but we are actually on top of that and are working proactively around that. The other thing around our consenting, as you know, we are 100% operational in our consenting area over the lockdown, and have been since day one. That work is continuing to make people, to ensure we don't slow things down, but the new things are that we are starting resource consenting virtual hearings. We are doing virtual checks with places like the Acute Services Building with the CDHB. and are currently drafting their certificate of public use, so that can be issued as soon as they provide the final details. We're also looking at virtual inspections with the port company so that work can proceed. Also in the consenting area, we are having an increasing number of complaints about animal management, and that's particularly around dogs not on leashes, and we are having an increase in noise complaints and increasing some aggression around when we go to deal with noise consents. The call centre is continuing and is now starting to get an increase in calls. They are actually managing the first 0800 calls when they come in, and also overseeing the outward bound calls. So as you know, they were 100% stood up before the lockdown and continuing to provide services, plus taking on extra work for other agencies who are unable to run a 24/7 service. So they are incredibly busy there as well. The capital program continues in terms of doing that work to prepare for coming out of lockdown, but also liaising with contractors and suppliers. We are very mindful that these are our partners and will be our partners in recovery, and we need to carry on supporting them during this time. The other areas across council that continue to be busy around our parks teams, which are continuing to have to do some of the controls around parks because of the increased dumping in parks. So they have to tidy that in case it is a fire risk or else increases rats and other vermin. They are also having to do much more pick up of rubbish and dog droppings in the parks, probably just because of the sheer number of people there. That's probably all there is to report on what's new. I can stress again the tremendous work that our comms people are doing to make sure people are kept informed, trying new ways of getting messages out every day, and ensuring that it reaches out not only on our media but also out through other channels. That's probably it. I don't know if there's any questions.
Yeah, I'll run round the table for this one because it is a significant set of issues. But just a couple of things. One is the that real need to be able to communicate with people who aren't online, whether they have a computer at home but it's somebody who's just not confident to look up websites or fill in forms or applications or anything online. I know that the council's got some good supporting facilities through the call centre where people can be assisted to fill in council forms, and I know that government departments have that too, but I think sometimes it's just that human contact that's really important for people. But I do worry that there isn't enough information that's actually physically being delivered to people's homes or made available at supermarkets so that people are picking up that essential information. I think that's what we've always relied on our free community newspapers for, and it's at this time I do worry that there are people out there, and I have reflected myself on the number of I put out sort of in the thousands earthquake information updates when I was a local member of parliament, but I had hundreds of people that I posted to, and they were people that had identified as wanting to have something sent to them because they couldn't access through the internet. So that was just in one electorate, and we're dealing with the whole of our city and the wider Banks Peninsula area as well. And the second thing is just to remind people we do have the beauty of the Banks Peninsula, and I know there are a lot of Christchurch people who've got fabulous batches over there, but stay at home. If you're at your batch during the lockdown, stay there. Don't come home to Christchurch. And if you're at your home, don't go to your batch. It's a staycation weekend. It is Easter, and it's an opportunity for people to kind of reflect on, you know, the significance of being together as a family. And I think we've been doing that for a couple of weeks now. But I think that it's really important that people stay at home and that staycation message really gets through. So would you like to just comment on that whole question about getting information out to people who aren't available or who aren't able to access information on the internet?
Yes, that is one of the reasons that we moved with urgency into these outward bound calls, because the initial target population there are probably going to be some of the people that aren't as digitally able or connected as other people. So the outward bound calls, a lot of that is about do they have the information? Do they know what's going on? Would they like more information? And being able to give them some immediate information but ensure they get more. We will actually be examining after this batch of outward bound calls, of which there are about 11,000 of them, whether we do other further outward bound calls and increase that to reach groups in the community that are less likely to be able to get access information online. And also we have our libraries team and the fingertip libraries still assisting people to access information and to get information online and log in online, but also just even if they don't want to do that, assist with them providing the information and getting it. And thirdly, our comms team are continuing to look at strategies like getting to supermarkets or other places. So, and actually just one other final thing, we are working with NGO, not-for-profit people to actually give them information so they can reach out to their client groups as well. So we're continually trying to look for new ways, and if any councillors have ideas, we would welcome emails and that would suggest other things that we could put in place, because we are very mindful of that as well.
That's great, thank you. Jimmy Chen?
Only one question, yes. Like the Mary, she mentioned earlier, you know, because at the moment staff provide essential services only, so the particular people are a little bit concerned. One is the some residents, you know, they probably stay at home, so they create a lot of the kind of rubbish, and they're dumping along the suburban area. It's very miserable. The other one is the particular, like between the Denton Park and the Kyle Park, the railway, you know, those the grass grows up so fast. They particular concern whether have a risk, you know, to create a fire risk again. This kind of, you know, this issue, I'm not sure whether staff still have people have a kind of irregular or regular monitoring regarding this our park, you know, or grass, etc. Whether
Look, I know that councillors have got individual issues that they want to raise, but the generic issues are really for this call, and I think that the individual issues, you know, like the grass growing, you know, I think a number of us are aware of that one too, but I think just keep sending them through the service centre, because the call centre is absolutely the place to send service requests, because they get prioritised and they get dealt to based on whether they are essential. But the generic issue, I think, Mary, goes to your point that you made in your presentation, which is that from a generic point of view, perhaps we could talk through the situation that's in place with our rubbish collection, because people are now allowed to use their yellow bins for rubbish, because it is going to go to landfill in the meantime, and that may assist some of the problem with the dumping that we're seeing.
Yes, there's probably no more to add to what you said. That's exactly the advice is use the red or yellow bins because it will be going to the landfill. Report any concerns you have through the call centre, and we are having increase in numbers of rubbish dumping on the roads and parks, and they are being triaged according to their urgency.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Leanne, you need to put your mic off.
Sorry, I did suggest that to a friend of mine that she could put her recycling to one side, and if she could store it, then she can use her red bin, her yellow bin in the yellow week purely for getting rid of it. So as much stuff that people are able to store that is recycling once we get back into the recycling mode, but it might make it easier for people at least even to get through the lockdown period if they just use the yellow bin for the rubbish, if they can. You know, it's just an idea. Catherine Chu.
Thanks, Mary. That's a really good update. No questions from me, Leanne.
Thank you. Melanie Coker.
Thanks, Mary. My question, I think you may have mostly really covered it, because what I had been wondering up till now was like our local community development advisors, for instance, I knew were quite regularly contacting community groups, and I was just wondering, you know, you've said about outward bound calls, but I was just wondering if they are contacting those sort of more smaller local groups and seeing if, you know, if they run a community centre, obviously that'll be shut, but are they able to communicate with each other? Do they need any help in those sorts of ways? Can you comment on that?
Yes, the local community staff are deployed in several things. One is actually keeping in contact with their local networks, providing with information and checking if they need any other support. A lot of them are actually now linked into the welfare support through the 0800 number, and also a number of them are doing the outward bound calls. So they are very busy, but they are definitely keeping in contact with their local networks and seeing if they need any support, but if any issues are emerging out of the contact the local community groups are making.
Great. Oh, that's really good. Thank you, Mary.
Pauline Cotter.
Great, thank you, Mary. Great report and great work happening all across the board there. Can you just run the 0800 number past me again, please?
Right, yes, I should remember because it's very, very easy.
24 24 11.
24 11. That's it.
24 24 11. That's wonderful. Thank you. That's all.
That's for people that can't get access to essential services. So they can't get anyone to collect their food for them. That, you know, that they've got no one to go to the supermarket for them. You know, and it's particularly for vulnerable people and for, you know, just people who just have no one to do it for them. And it's really to make sure that no one gets left behind.
It's fantastic. Thank you.
James Daniels.
Kia ora. Actually, that surprises me about that 0800 24 24 11. While it's good to have, I'd have thought that we already had that kind of service covered. But nevertheless, I'm glad that we're
James, we're doing it for civil defence. So the government decided that every locality would set up its own local call centre, and it was to take pressure off the 0800 numbers that they'd already established, but also to put the locality at the centre of the request. So that's the Christchurch City Council put up its hand and said we're prepared to do it for the region, and that it simply sends the calls out into the region and deals with the ones that are within our patch.
Your triage.
Mayor, if I could add to that, I believe we were, if we weren't the first, we were one of the first to actually step up to do that in the country.
And we're one of the only ones that's working 24/7, so it's great. The team have done an extraordinary job, and they ought to be highly congratulated. So you know, it's a good thing, James.
Well, yeah, no, I didn't think it was a bad thing. I'm glad that we're here for that. So I've got a couple of questions. Mary, you mentioned food parcels, that you're getting quite a few calls for food parcels. Are we putting those together, or are we putting that to the likes of the City Mission? or are we putting it together? You said we were sending them out.
Yep. So we're supporting and resourcing the city mission, both financially, and that's will be reimbursed through civil defence nationally, and also supporting them through staff with drivers so they can actually continue on their service at an increased level. For other food parcels, we are initially doing some ourselves through our civil defence response teams, and that's just because we needed to step it up and get going quickly, but we actually will intend to send more to other agencies like Student Volunteer Army, which is why we've put additional staff in to back them up, and also other places like Salvation Army. So we are using networks and other agencies where we can, and doing it in partnership with them, and supporting them where we can't and there's still a need. We're doing it ourselves through our response team. But as I said, these essential welfare supplies will be reimbursed through central government under the Civil Defence Declaration.
Yeah, okay. Wasn't worried about
Is James a Dalek? You're a Dalek.
Yep.
Still a Dalek. No.
Exterminate.
No.
Exterminate.
That's it. We heard
right now?
that.
Okay,
Yeah, that wasn't
right.
a good thing to come back online with.
Not without the Dalek thing. Look, the next question is. Oh yeah, that's right. Look, I'm not getting outside of the sight or the sound and smell of the sea. So, can you hear me? That's not me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, right here. So I'm not getting away from the sound of the sea and the smell of the sea. So I don't know, is graffiti an issue around the rest of the city? And what are we doing about it, if anything?
Yes, graffiti is an issue around different parts of the city. At the moment, we are not considering cleaning it off as an essential service, but actually are preparing and ready to clean it as soon as the alert is lifted. So we're aware of it, we've recorded it, and we will put processes in place to clean it as soon as we can.
Good. Thank you. That's all from me. Thanks, Mary.
Thanks.
Thanks, James. Mike Davidson.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary. Just a couple of things from me. I noted that obviously you're getting an increase in various calls and complaints, etc. That's obviously quite important data, which potentially will show.
Mike, put your headphone down so you can the microphone on your head. We can barely hear you.
I'll start again. Thanks, Sam. Just a couple of things. You mentioned that you had an increase in various calls and complaints, and I guess that's quite important data and will potentially show an upward trend in the strains it's putting on people. And obviously the well-being of people in lockdown is quite important. Are we collecting that data and then passing that on?
Yes, so we get a daily report about what's coming through our call centre, and that's usually we're starting to report that in our twice a week intel reports, saying what the trends are there. If there are issues that aren't directly related to council, we do pass them on to other agencies, and they do go forward to the EOC, and some go up to the regional and national to see if these are regional and national trends. So we do have a daily data report, and we can actually give you summaries of those on a weekly basis, if you like, just to say what the key trends are for the week.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess even when you look at stuff that is just, I guess, solely related to council, say noise complaints, I guess the increase in noise complaints is showing that there's actually an increase, I guess, in stress and strain on people's lives. And I guess it's actually having a look at that, creating the data and showing the trend, and then passing that on to the relevant authority as well, so they're aware of the actual pressure that people are having been in lockdown.
Yes, and some of it, some of the complaints are alcohol fueled as well. You know, people at home drinking, playing loud music, being rowdy, that type of thing. So we have had an increase in that as well.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing was on the yellow bins, and I'm just a little bit concerned, I guess, with the messaging that we are doing, and we're potentially going to create habits that will be hard to break when we do come out of lockdown. I think we did a lot of good work to start getting people to put the right things into the yellow bin. And potentially we're going to undo that completely by encouraging the use of all just general rubbish going into them. It's just a concern I have.
Great.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I can follow that up with our comms and our waste team and just check exactly the messaging that's going and be mindful of the fact that we don't want to break really good habits. So I'll follow up and come back to you.
Thank you.
That's certainly the message that went out, that we don't want to break habits. But the truth is that there are 3 reasons that sit behind the decision for Eco Central not to proceed. One was the inability to protect the health and safety of staff. And secondly was the increased contamination. It was exponentially increased since the lockdown. So it was just instantaneous, just people using the yellow bin after all of the good work that we'd done. So in a way, we've just given into that and said, you know, that during this period, it's going to be used for the for red bin as well. It's all going to landfill, you know, as much as people can save for later as possible. But the third is that there are issues around markets for recycling products. So there are a number of challenges facing Eco Central, and we as a city, as you know, the purchaser of those services is going to have a serious look at all of those issues when we have the chance to do so. Anne Galloway.
Kia ora, thanks Mary. Remarkable work being done. Thank you. Just thinking about the collaboration or partnership with the police and hearing, you know, alarming statistics, unfortunate statistics about family violence. How closely is the call centre working with police?
The police are in the EOC and ECC with us, so they are there. We're there for stand-up meetings with the civil defence team, so working closely. They are working closely if we have call-outs from noise complaints. Sometimes police accompany those if need be, and we're working very closely. We have a very strong relationship with the police here in Christchurch. It's been built up over a number of years, so working closely with them on any issues that emerge and sort of daily contact.
Excuse me, somebody has got their phone on. Who's got their microphone on?
Someone was just breathing very heavily.
It's gone. They were breathing very heavily, and it didn't ruin the call because this call's going very well.
Maybe we've been hacked.
It's been sorted. So does that answer your question?
Yes, I had just one other question, or one thought actually, in terms of information. Everyone's standing in line at supermarkets. Could there be small notice boards, you know, put along?
There
so
are people taking care of that. I'd rather that we use this for the council briefing.
Thank you.
Thanks. James Goff.
No questions from me, thanks.
Thank you. Jani Johansson.
Thank you. 3 questions. One is, when are we likely to get a list of work that is happening, work that's postponed, and be able to communicate that to our community and our community boards? I'm getting a lot of emails from concerned people.
I've got a meeting set up with Dawn this afternoon to talk about that, because there's a proper process that we just need to put in place, and we need to act very, very quickly in order to answer that question. So next question.
Right. So next question really relates to Māori and Pacifica communities. There's emerging, well, it's not being, I mean, I've raised it probably over a month ago now, but there's just repeated media articles about those communities not getting things in a way that is clear or easy to understand, and there's no specific tailored response plans that appears to be developed for those communities that are, as I understand it, very much likely at huge risk, far greater risk than the average community. So I just really wanted to understand at a local level if we've got discrete plans to make sure that we're communicating and engaging with those communities in terms of a specific response.
Yes, Ngāi Tahu are taking the lead in the response for Māori communities, and they are incredibly active in that. They are doing a similar outward bound calls. The support of their NGOs and whānau order providers, and they are working both across Ngāi Tahu and other iwi groupings, so they are taking the lead there. There's also a Pacifica collective, and they are taking the lead across there as well. We are in communication with them. They are part of the interagency response out of the EOC, so we keep in communication with them, and I have regular communication with the mana whenua as well.
Right, okay, so there are specific plans and connection to those communities. Good. It might be useful in one of our updates just to get a little bit more detail if that was possible, because I think it's a real positive, and thank you for taking those concerns on board. And just a final question, you keep talking about the resourcing, and we're doing a lot, and we've kind of heard that when we come at the emergency, civil defence will reimburse us, but I guess our experience through the earthquake was that not having clarity at the start leads to a lot of argument in the future. So can you just I asked this at our last council meeting. I'm just trying to get some sense of how we're paying for what we're doing, and what's the sort of budget envelope, and what budget agreements we have with central government.
Can we again just park this and respond to it later, because where it's directed by, where it's directed by civil defence, there are agreements.
Right, can that be circulated to us?
Before we do something, we do confirm it both on the national phone call, and then we confirm it via email out of the EOC that these activities will be reimbursed. So we do have, we are mindful of needing clarity around those things, and we are getting clarity both verbally on the national call, and then also confirming it in writing.
Okay, good, thanks.
Thank you. Aaron Keown.
Yes, great to be back, everyone. So I just jotted down a couple of points based on everyone else's conversations, and thank you, Mary, for the report. Yanni, on the Māori and Pacific, the DHB's had a lens on that right from the start. I'm not sure if you're aware, but Gabrielle Huri is now the Deputy Chair of the board, and just so you know, breakdown in ethnicity, Māori in Canterbury are tracking infection rate at half the general population. So their rate of infection is very low at the moment here. Let's hope it stays that way. So that's a real positive. So there's some good work happening. Just on a couple of things. So rubbish dumping, with this illegal dumping, can we get our rubbish dumps open, even if it's the pit only, and it's pay wave? So you could have some strict rules. People stay apart, only use every second space at the pit, and people can dump, because that is our core business. Well, one of them.
Yeah. The thing is that whether it's an essential service or not. So, Mary?
Yep, no, it's not considered an essential service. That for 4 weeks we believe that, and this is the view nationally as well, we believe households can actually cope with their dumping and using their bins for 4 weeks, and actually any garden rubbish they can just store on their property until the lockdown is finished. So it's not considered an essential service, and people should be able to manage their rubbish themselves. We're mindful we do get dumping all the time, even when we don't have a lockdown in our parks, and probably people are just seeing more of it is because they're out walking in our parks, and also we don't have the same amount of maintenance staff out there collecting it on a daily basis, but this is common occurrence in our parks.
Yeah, okay. So on the yellow bins, my fear around us telling people it's okay to put rubbish in your yellow bin is that you'll contaminate the bin itself by, sticky bits and muck getting stuck in there, and then people either got to clean their bins out or there'll be contamination, and then the trucks themselves will be contaminated because the trucks that carry the recyclables are relatively clean. So I am quite against us having any messaging that says it's okay to put rubbish in a yellow bin. So I support Mike on his point on that. So if we can maybe rediscuss how we message that,
it's a bit late.
Yeah, it's too late because Eco Central has made a decision to close down its the recycling component, and the choice was to accept that people would be able to deal with the amount of rubbish that they were producing with one red bin a fortnight, half the size of the yellow bin. So it was a practical solution to the problem that we've got. And it's not our decision about closing down the facility. It had to be confirmed by way of staff delegation, but the decision ultimately, Eco Central Board looking at health and safety, and you know the importance of health and safety, and at the end of the day, it had to close.
Yeah, that wasn't the point I raised at all, but it's good that everyone misunderstood it. The point I was raising is that I totally understand that has to be closed down and that the recycling is going up to Cape Valley. What I'm saying is I think it's poor form that we tell people it's okay to put rubbish in the yellow bin when they should be just in the red bin, because the yellow bins and those trucks will get contaminated as well as
we can't replace we can't tell everyone. I mean, yeah, okay, look,
that's all right.
We'll take it offline because there is an answer to that question, but I don't want to hold up the meeting.
Okay, then the other two, just quickly, is graffiti. That with the build-up of graffiti, that maybe it could be one of those jobs that the Student Volunteer Army might be interested in helping tackle in one hit after the lockdown.
Yes, we actually, to the last count, I think we had 1,000 volunteers already in our graffiti, across our graffiti project. So we do already have a large number of volunteers as well as some contractors in there. So we can, we will look at some initiatives like increasing the volunteer hours into that.
Cool, that's great. And then finally, just the last one on the when you said before, Mayor, about the challenges for Eco Central. Challenges are actually always opportunities when you look at them from the other side. So we should always watch our language in a recovery that was solution focused rather than problem focused. And I think coming out of the earthquakes, that was one of Christchurch and Canterbury's main problems, is that we were too often problem focused and not solution focused. So if we always watch our language around opportunities, because I think there's a lot in recycling. Thank you.
I apologise for that, and I totally agree. Sam McDonald?
No questions, just to say it's a faultless response. Mary, you've done a great job. So.
Thank you. Jake McClellan?
No questions from me either.
Thank you. Phil Major?
Yeah, g'day Mary, well done, thank you. One thing I agree with Mike, that we could use this yellow bin thing when it comes back online to actually do a bit of retraining with our recycling going forward, and maybe have glass separate, cardboard in the green bin, whatever, but we don't need to do it now, obviously, but and I understand why we had to do it. So, yeah, it's well done, Mary, it's good.
Thank you. Tim Scandrett?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Templeton?
Thank you. Really comprehensive, Mary. Thank you so much. Looking forward to this stage being over and us being able to take a bit of a breather. But it would be really good, and I know we've done this a couple of times already with the recycling. My suggestion is actually just to collect the red bin weekly and have everyone just put the yellow bins away for now. So that's exactly the same volume. Everything goes in the red bin. People put their yellow bin away, and that way, when we go back to being able to do recycling, we just say, hey, these are the things that go in your yellow bin, rather than getting people into the habit of contaminating stuff into the yellow bin for now. But apart from that, that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Andrew Turner?
Nothing from me except to say, Mary, thanks very much indeed to you and the team for all the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. It's much appreciated. Thank you very much for what the whole team's doing, and please pass on our thanks from everyone through to the EOC onto the rest of it. And we've got a resolution here that the council receive the verbal update from the COVID-19 Incident Management Team lead.
Happy to
Moved by
second.
Sarah Templeton, seconded by
Melanie.
Melanie Coker. Sorry, just recognising voices.
Just a bit of discussion, if that's okay.
Well, I'd rather not go through the list.
I don't think you need to, Leanne. I'm more than happy not to discuss anything else.
So, is Yanni the only one that wants to say something? Yep. Okay, Yanni.
Thank you, and thank you to Mary and the staff for all the work that they're doing. It is a huge task, and they are doing a really fantastic job. I just wondered whether it would be useful to have an amendment or an additional resolution to
It's
get
too
a report
late. We've
back.
opened up the debate, Yanni. So if you'd wanted to move an amendment, you should have said so at the beginning. You can't start a debate. I'm ruling on a point of order.
I couldn't get the question
you should have
answered,
said that. You should have said that you wanted to move an amendment to the resolution prior to me putting the resolution. You then asked to speak to it. You didn't say that you wanted to amend it. It's too late to amend it now. So please, Yanni, we're all struggling with a different environment to work with. Can you finish your debate? Obviously, we will take notes from what you say. As I say, there are a number of issues that I'm following up with Dawn this afternoon, and I will listen intently. Far away.
Right. Okay. So look, I appreciate the fact that you're going to follow up stuff after this meeting, but I think for the community, in terms of transparency, it's really critical that we send a signal around what's happening with our community boards, what's happening with projects that are either put on hold or that are proceeding. We voted not to suspend non-urgent work, and that was very deliberate, and we had a discussion about that previously at council. But I think the community are getting very confused about a whole bunch of things that are out for consultation, projects that were underway, and decision making at a local level that just seems to be in a vacuum. So we need to get some clear understanding of what work is going on, what work is being postponed, and who's making the decisions when. And I think that's really, really critical. So although I can't move an amendment today, I would like us to have some opportunity to consider as soon as possible giving community boards their delegations back, because my understanding is with the changes that are being made, they can actually make virtual meetings now that can comply with the Local Government Act. So I just really wanted to emphasise that there has been a frustration over the last week, certainly expressed to me from people in the community over that specific issue, and I think we need to address it. Thank you.
I would like to close the debate with some comments about a sequence of emails that I read at 10 o'clock last night, which had been circulating amongst a group of a particular community board. I think Councillor Johansson's a member of the community board. No one sent the email trail to me, so I wasn't aware of it, nor was the chief executive. We've both now become aware of it, and as a result, we've set up a meeting this afternoon. There are a number of submissions that were open at the time or closing at the time of the lockdown being imposed. This was not an issue that we factored into what was required to be an urgent decision. We do need to amend our processes. I'm not saying that we need to reinstate the entire community board network in an environment where staff are undertaking a variety of different functions as a result of the state of emergency that we're in, and people forget that this is a state of national emergency, and we also have a number of other considerations to make. But the council now holds all the delegations, and I think one of the solutions will be to simply delegate to either members of a community board or to councillors and community board members particular hearings panel obligations. But these are the issues that I'm going to discuss with the Chief Executive. I promise that there will be a discussion about them with councillors next Tuesday, because we're now focused on finding a solution. We're seeing this as an opportunity to find a different way of working in environments that have been rapidly changing and which may be extended or changed between different levels. So I certainly undertake to councillors and to Councillor Johansson in particular, and I know Councillor McClellan was involved in that one as well, and Councillor Templeton, that we will come back for a broader discussion next week on an informal basis with a solution rather than an empty conversation. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary. That's great. And so the next item on the agenda is the draft outline for amendments to the Christchurch Central Recovery Plan for the multi-use arena. We've had a briefing on this prior to the lockdown, and so now it's an opportunity to get this moving. And so if I hand over to, I'm not sure who's taking us through this. Is it David Griffiths, or who's the lead on this one, Dawn?
David Faulkner, is it David?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, sorry.
Yep, it's all right. Yeah, hello Councillor, David Faulkner, Team Leader, City Planning here. So this is a report to approve a draft outline for a process to amend the Christchurch Central Recovery Plan in respect of the multi-use arena, and have that sent to strategic partners. Now, the reason for bringing this to you today is there's a number of steps that we need to take to make this amendment, and those steps are time-bound in the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act, and thus, if we don't start the process soon, it could impact on whether we can start the construction of the multi-use arena within the timeframes that we're trying to do that. So this is a report to progress those steps. The main issue that we're looking at is the issue of noise around the stadium, and how we can mitigate that noise, but also how we can ensure that the stadium will help with the regeneration of that part of the central city. The reason why we're using the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act process is because we need to amend the designation that was put in place by the recovery plan. So in order to amend that designation, we need to change the recovery plan. Now, the amendment bill that is before Parliament at the moment for the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act, that doesn't change this process at all, so we can continue with this process. The only potential change is that the role of Regenerate Christchurch in this process will revert back to Council if that amendment bill is passed, but the actual steps don't change at all. Yeah, I'm happy to take any questions if any councillors have any questions.
Sorry, it's... Sorry, I'm just struggling to get my computer screen working. So, who has questions?
May I ask one question?
Yes, you can ask a question, Jimmy.
Okay. Regarding to the paragraph 5.2, the staff will continue review those noise issue. I would like to know what is the time frame. Paragraph 5.2, second part of your noise, mitigate the noise standard. Yeah.
So
what's the time frame? Yes.
Yep. So we've outlined a bit of a time frame in it's in the attachment. It's page 5 of the attachment. I think it's page 18 on your agendas. Now that sets out the process that we'll be following for this amendment. We are intending to have the amendment drafted by sort of halfway through the second half of this year, and have public consultation as part of that. We've already started discussions with VBase and with other, well, and VBase have actually started discussions with concert promoters. It's actually been quite a good time actually with the lockdown. Actually, there's a lot of concert promoters around the world that have a lot of time on their hands at the moment. So we're actually starting conversations with them about what can work for them in terms of the noise. So we're having promising conversations with them, and we will come back to you with the potential changes to the noise provisions. So the decision today is just about approving the draft process and getting that getting input from strategic partners on that, and then we will come back to you later this year with the actual amendments once the draft process has been approved by the Minister.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your answer. Yeah.
I think people, are there any other questions?
Yes, thank you.
Yanni?
Yeah, thanks. I was just looking at the time frame on page 18, and I was just a little bit confused. So I'm just trying to understand, like, this isn't the amendments that we're approving today, but then it says the outline goes to Regenerate Christchurch, and I'm just wondering whether there's enough detail in here to be clear about what we're actually trying to do. I mean, when do we get the specifics in terms of a greater sense of detail about what we're trying to achieve? And related to that is when we've previously been briefed, there's been other concerns raised about things like the traffic impacts, which I see no discussion of in here. And I would have thought if we were changing the district plan, then we should be thinking about not just noise, but other aspects that are likely to require plan changes at the, concisely together.
Yep. So there's a question. So this is a two-step process, and that's set out in the Regeneration Act. So we have to have this outline first, and yes, this outline doesn't have any detail in terms of what the specific changes are, because the outline is primarily just outlining the process that we will follow to come up with those changes. So we have to do that, and we have to get that approved by the Minister, and it has to go through Regenerate Christchurch, and it has to go through all the strategic partners before we can actually do the amendments. And then, so the second step will be actually doing the amendments and bringing those back to you later in the year. So that's why we need to get this moving, because there's all these different steps to make this change. So we will have more detail when we come back to you, So, and as I say, we've already started discussions with concert promoters and so forth to try and get that detail. So we will definitely have more detail later in the year. In terms of all the other issues, yes, there is other issues that we're working on, and we at this stage, noise is the only issue that we have identified that needs a district plan change. There are other issues, and you've raised transport as one, that we are working on. We are confident at this stage that we can deal with those through our existing road controlling authority provisions. We can provide changes to the streets and changes to parking that we need to deal with those transport effects. But we are working on those at the moment. If anything changes, we'll definitely come back to you and make sure that we have all the powers we need. But at this stage, we don't believe we need any extra powers in that regard.
And the final question was, I did send through to ahead of the meeting, but we've previously had a briefing about appointing the trustees to the Stadium Trust. So I'm just wondering where that's got to.
That's not a question for
no, it's a question for the
chief executive. To this paper,
yeah.
But it's not for now. We'll come back to you on that. I mean, there is still a process to go through in relation to that. So, but it's not on the agenda today.
I guess wouldn't you want that group kind of being involved in the process from as soon as possible?
I think there is a good case to have the chief executive appointment to proceed as quickly as possible. Well, not the chief executive, the chair's appointment to proceed as quickly as possible. Yes, I agree. In terms of the process during a lockdown, beyond that, I don't know that. I don't know that it can go wider than that. But Dawn, would you like to just quickly update on that process? Because I think it is important that we go ahead with that as soon as possible, and I think we could deal with that at the next meeting. Perhaps Dawn?
That's exactly what I was about to say. Mayor, following discussions, I believe we can bring this to our next council meeting, which is the 23rd of April, to appoint the chair. And I would like to do the briefing into members before then.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? All right. Do I have somebody? Well, I'll move it just so it's easier for everyone. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
I'll second.
Who was that? Who seconded it?
Anne Galloway.
Anne Galloway. Anne Galloway. Is there any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no.
Aye.
That's carried. Lovely. Thank you very much. The next one I'm conflicted for is a director of Christchurch City Holdings. So if somebody, I'll put myself on silent mode, and so is Andrew.
Yeah,
and
the
so
other three
is,
too.
James
Thanks.
Goff and Sarah Templeton. So I'm going to put myself.
I'm on, so don't make a note.
Mute my. Oh, sorry. I'm going to mute my mic. And so Sam McDonald can take over the chairing of this, as it's normally a finance and performance one as the deputy chair. But I suppose technically speaking, this is a meeting of the council. So I'd like to. Well, am I? No. Is it the balance of the meeting that nominates? I suppose. Am I allowed to nominate a chair?
I'll nominate Sam to take over as a chair. There's Tim here.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That's carried. Sam McDonald, you're in the chair. I'm just going to switch my video off and switch my microphone off and get myself a cup of coffee, and I'll be back. Somebody can just ring me. Just ring.
Okay. Yep. Thanks very much, Leanne. Carol and Diane, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Diane, do you want to just talk us through the paper, and then we'll go to questions from councillors?
Okay, thank you. This paper is just to renew an existing arrangement we have, whereby we borrow money for CCHL through LGFA and on-lend it back to them. The arrangement is currently in place, and the purpose of this paper is to provide the board with some security or some assurance that the procedure will continue to exist beyond June. CCHL don't normally borrow all of their money through LGFA, but in the current market they are doing so because of the existing rates and the difficulty in borrowing. And so it's really uncertain as to how long this will continue, given the uncertainty in the market. The arrangement is identical to what we've already got in place, and as you can see there in the recommendation, it's only done if CCHL can provide us with the insurances listed under A, B and C of the recommendation. And I think that summarises it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, that's great, Diane. Thanks very much. So it's just re-emphasising it's basically a procedural or administrative motion that we need to put through. Does anyone have any questions for Diane? No?
Yeah, I do have a question. I've emailed it through, but I'll just quickly say it. I'm just wondering when we're getting briefed by CCHL on the COVID-19 response, because although I understand this is a procedural motion as much as anything, it does seem that we don't have very much information about what's going on with them, and given the significance of them to our city and our council, then it would be really good to be informed. So can I just check, do we know when that's scheduled for?
Yeah, so Yanni, it's probably not a question for Diane, but is Dawn on the line still?
Sam, it's Carol here.
Oh,
I can make some brief comments. The CCHL management and board are proactively looking at the impacts for both CCHL and the group, and I'm sure that via Dawn, our Chief Executive, when they're in a position to be able to give Council an update, that they will do so.
Perfect, thanks. And that's a really good point, Yanni.
Could we maybe ask for the briefing next Tuesday?
Well, let's just let them work out where they're at. There's been a lot of change in the last week or two, and Dawn, as Carol mentioned, will come back to us. So give them the space they need to do it, and we'll go from there.
I have a question, Sam. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, Pauline, go for it.
Thanks. Is there any additional cost to count in us performing the borrowing and then on lending it?
No, there is no additional cost to council. We put a small margin on top. Under the Local Government Act, we are not allowed to on-lend to CCO at less than what the money costs us, and so we add a small margin, which is 20 basis points, in order to ensure we've covered any costs.
Great, thank you.
Cool. Are there any other questions from anyone?
Yes, Sam, I've got one question.
Yeah, go for it.
Thanks. I guess these are very uncertain times at the moment, and this is obviously something we've done for quite a while, but it's not, the same situation as it has been for a while. So is there any risk in what we're doing?
Not in passing this, no, there is not. And as Carol has indicated, there's a lot of work going on by CCHL and by their board, and there will be some serious discussions between CCHL and council, so that we're quite comfortable going forward that the financial integrity and covenants of council and CCHL are maintained. So this on its own adds no risk, because remember, they can still continue to do this procedure exists through till June. And as I said, we're all aware of the potential risk and are looking to see what we can do to manage it.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Any other questions? No, perfect. Well, look, I'm happy to move it. Do I have a seconder?
So I'm happy second. Yeah.
So Jimmy, you're happy to second that?
Yeah, Jimmy. Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Jimmy. Is there any discussion? No discussion? Fantastic. I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against? That's carried. Excellent. Thanks very much, Diane, for that.
Thank you.
Okay, is Leanne... does someone want to let Leanne know that we're back and she can carry on?
It's Jo, Sam. I have texted her, so I'll just try her again now.
Okay, thanks. And the others as well, if they've come off. I see Sarah's back, and hopefully the others are too. So.
It's only going to public excluded next, you could just move it.
Yeah. Or should we just do that? I'm happy to move it. Would someone like to second it?
I'll second. It's Tim here. I'll second it.
Tim, you're happy to second it? Any discussion?
Yes. Yeah, I won't support it.
You won't support it? Okay. Joe, can you just note that Yanni's opposed? All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
Yeah, just Yanni. And you want that noted?
Please, thank you.
Cool,
thank you. Not sure you could do that, because Leanne hasn't got a conflict for this item, just saying.
I'm chairing the meeting though.
Yeah.
No, only for the one item that she was conflicted for.
Here she is.
It's not a biggie, but yeah.
It's not a biggie.
It's done. The chairman moved it, got seconded.
Yeah.
It's all legit.
Yeah, we do just want to make sure that any movement to go into PX is valid.
So, Joe, could you just confirm that it is valid?
Through you, Chair. Sam was in the chair at that time. He was appointed chair and the chair wasn't in the room, so the resolution is valid.
Yep, perfect.
Cool.
So we've agreed to go into PX now. So good suggestion, Mike. That's great.
Leanne, you're muted.
Here to help.